gay community is often defined simply by their sexuality. Though like our heterosexual counterparts, sexuality and sexual expression can be a bumpy road with often little to no direction given to us by our parents, teachers, or even the media. Tonight we're going to be discussing some of the most common misperceptions, difficulties, and issues involving sexuality in the gay community. With us this evening is Evelyn Green, a certified sex therapist and licensed professional counselor who specializes in desire problems. I'd also like to introduce Ellie Pope, who owns Wild Wiggle, a company that specializes in tantric-based sexual and relationship workshops for both men and women. Thank you both for being with us tonight.
That's great to be here.
Well, Evelyn, why don't you start by saying a little bit about your expertise?
Well, I spend most of my practice consists of working with couples who are having desire problems, where one member of the couple has low desire and the other member of the couple has a higher desire and is complaining because they're not having enough or getting enough sex in the relationship.
I think we've all complained about one or the other of that.
Yes, yes. And so what I do is try to figure out why that's happening. Most of the time what's going on is anger and resentment. And so we begin to work on how to alleviate some of that anger and resentment in the relationship. And I wonder if you find that to be true as well.
Anger and resentment? Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
You were probably about to ask me about what I do.
Sure.
So, yeah, I'm a
Let's come back,
Tantra teacher. And Tantra is a system, it's a spiritual system from Eastern India. And it's something that used to be taught to the householders as a way to keep marriages together and keep couples together. And anger and resentment is something that I see a lot as well. It's something that has us not be able to be as intimate because we're guarded. And there's something that we're holding that gets in the way that keeps us from really being able to engage sexually with somebody, because who wants to be touched when you're a little bit peeved? And we do lots of work as far as letting go of that anger and really letting go of the guard, letting go of the mind chatter, which is a lot of what Tantra is about, is a meditation system.
Interesting. Do you think that because the gay community is maybe doesn't have all the rights that we could have, or that our heterosexual counterparts do have, do you think that there's an increase in anger and resentment in the gay community? What do you think, Evelyn?
Well, I don't know if there's an increase of anger and resentment within the context of the relationship, but I think that definitely gay and lesbian couples can begin to feel isolated in terms of not having an outside source to help them deal with problems. They don't have a mother or a father that might be supportive. They don't have a minister that might be supportive of them in order to alleviate and help young people deal with the problems that come up that are very common in relationships.
Or even role models.
Exactly.
Often we don't see role models either in our community or on television or things like that.
So I think it's the isolation that happens more so than more problems, on a sexual level or on any other level, because Americans in general have problems on a sexual level. But, I don't think that gay and lesbian people have more problems than any other Americans on a sexual level.
We have just the same terrible problems everyone else does.
Yeah. I mean, we do. I think Americans give, their kids lots of information. Parents give their kids lots of information about how to help relationships survive and thrive. The mother teaches how to cook, and the dad teaches how to get the oil changed and put the shutters on and all that information. But rarely do parents give information about how to be sexual. Well, you don't hear the father say to the son, "Now listen, this is what your mom and I have discovered about sexuality. I learned about the clitoris, and it's a great thing to know about."
And if you're lucky, you might get, this is how to prevent pregnancy, and this is the condom.
Yeah, or a hygiene
talk. But it's very rarely, son, this is how you date another man, and this is how you relate to one another.
Or even if it's heterosexual, they're not passing that information on heterosexually either.
Sure.
So of course, how are you going to talk about, if you find out that your kid is gay, how are you going to begin talking about that with your kid?
Sure.
When you can't talk about it heterosexually.
Absolutely. Ellie, do you find that a lot of what you do is communication and being able to communicate with one another, kind of on that same level?
Yeah, absolutely. There's even getting beyond what's said, there's a body level communication. And so sometimes there are things that haven't been said verbally, and yet with sexuality, you can actually engage at a physical level and start to let things go as well, especially if you start to do some practices ahead of time for clearing out the mind. And then touch is something which is so healing. And so being able to bring touch in and really where somebody can actually relax, it can actually make the communication later easier to come back when some of that stuff is, when we've joined in pleasure together.
Sure.
Yeah.
I actually like to say that, sex is to a marriage as oil is to your engine in your car. It's like, it's no problem if it's there. You never even think about it. But if it's not there, then it causes really big problems, because sex is the oil that lubricates the mechanisms of long-term relationship.
Sure. So one of the common problems that I seem to hear in the lesbian community is this idea of lesbian bed death, and it scares the bejesus out of me. I'll be honest. I mean, that's one of my fears in any relationship. Is there some truth to that, and what's going on? Ellie, you want to start?
Well, I think lesbian bed death is what's at the root of it is having two what we call yin people coming together. So there's the yin and the yang, which comes from the Taoist the spiritual sexuality. And yin and yang are two things that come together. If you've ever seen that circle, with the black and the white with the dots. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
yin yang is how we usually hear it, right?
Yeah, yin yang, yin yang, same thing. So each of us has a certain amount of masculine energy and a certain amount of feminine energy. And when we come together with somebody who's of the same gender, we can really amplify just the one energy and really get a lot of yin energy going. And the yin energy, for instance, tends to be a much more slow energy. And so where women do tend to like things to be more slow and more easy, when you have two women together, you don't necessarily have that spark that comes in from the masculine. And so some of the things I like to look at are, how can we evoke some of the masculine energy and evoke some of the feminine energy to have that polarity coming together. What do you find? How do you work with that?
Well, I think we talked about this earlier, but we talked about the fact that women are very often unaware of their bodies. They're unaware of their arousal. They're unaware of what causes desire to ignite in them. And we talked about how we get socialized as women not to be aware of that. So one of the things I try to work with is to try to get women to be more aware of what is arousing for them. So I'll give that as a homework assignment. I'll say, notice how you're getting aroused during the, from this session to the next. How are you getting aroused? What causes desire to ignite in your body?
And it seems so simple, yet often we're giving these messages as women that we're not supposed to be sexual creatures, and if we are, then it's the extreme. Then we're the whore, and it comes with the social punishment of that.
Yes.
So to explore our own bodies is often so taboo. How do you deal with that anxiety with the women that come to you?
Well, what I find happens with a lot of women is we have a real disconnect between the mind and the body.
Yes.
And it's really hard. We get the mind chatter. It's really hard to feel into the body. And so using some meditation techniques, you can actually get your attention into your body much more easily. There's something that I do called feeling of the core of the energy. And it's really identifying where is the sensation and going right into the middle of the sensation. And out of that, you can start to amplify the sensation and even move pleasure through the body. So it's not just a matter of feeling pleasure in the heart or in the genitals, but really how do we have pleasure take over the whole body so that everything is engaged and feeling it and getting juicy.
Exactly.
So to
releasing ourselves to be able to, giving ourselves permission almost to be able to feel all of that.
Yeah.
And I think that's really like an element of maturity too, which we don't necessarily see in our culture. We have these three archetypes for women. We have the virgin, the mother, and the whore. And the virgin and the mother are really good girls. And
not sexual meaning.
Yes, they're good girls in the sense that they're not sexual.
Right. Except once, exactly.
Yeah.
You can have a baby.
Yeah, and that's it. It's all over after that. You have to go back to being a virgin now. Okay, so we have those three archetypes, and what you want to encourage women to have pleasure on purpose. And very often that is something that hasn't been taught at all. You hear your mother say, put your dress down, cross your legs, and we often don't encourage women at all to feel their genitals or feel their bodies at all. And so one of the things I like to do is to try to get women to doing that through masturbation and other techniques.
Do you find that women are really anxious when this is brought up? Really? Do you find any anxiety that you have to
It's all over the place.
Yeah.
Some women, I'm really surprised at how at ease they are in the conversation. Other women, I'm really surprised at how not at ease. And it's very much, it's just hard to tell a lot of times with who you're talking to, and it's got a lot to do with upbringing.
Sure.
Yeah.
How about your thoughts, Evelyn?
I think sometimes I'm really surprised at how shy people are. I'm very surprised. You think, especially with younger people, you think, oh well, they have it all together. They're not like us older people who went through this, had to go through the sexual revolution out of the 1950s, being brought up in the 1950s. But I think I'm still surprised at how shy young people are about talking about their sexuality. I think what people are more likely to talk about everything else except for what their own desire is and what ignites their desire. Because then you have to get naked in your mind, and that's the biggest sex organ right there, right, is the mind.
Say more about that. I like that metaphor, being naked in your mind. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, like, really actually owning up to what turns you on, just for yourself, And then the next step, of course, in intimacy, because we talk about, the intimacy is being who you are in the presence of another person. And so when you really get naked, it's like owning what your sexual fantasies and desire is, and then the next step is revealing it to somebody else. That's really takes courage.
Sure,
it really does.
And that's where great sex comes in.
Exactly.
It is, because the more that you can be yourself,
exactly,
and the more you can accept somebody else being exactly who they are, that's when the spark can really come in, because you can relax, you can actually be with the experience rather than trying to guard and protect and hide who you are and anything else that may be going on.
And speaking of that, I read a statistic just recently that only 39% of lesbians make oral sex a regular part of their sex life. 50% for gay males, which I still thought was fairly low. And then a dismal 30 or 25% for heterosexuals. I can't remember that one exactly. Didn't interest me as much. But why do you think that those numbers are so low? Is it part of we're just not comfortable with our own bodies? So Evelyn, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think different women have different reasons for not liking that. With some young women, it's because they're just shy and they're not sure how to go about doing it. And so part of what I do with them is work with them, how exactly do you do this?
Techniques.
Yeah, so you're talking about just technique. And with some women, they actually do think their bodies are not clean, and why would they think their bodies are clean? The whole thing that you get in 5th grade is all about hygiene, keeping that thing clean.
That's all we hear about our genitals.
Exactly.
How to clean them.
Exactly.
What will come out.
As if female sexuality is just all about the hygiene problem.
Right.
Well, and even the language that we use, which I probably can't say here on camera, but most of the words that we use for our genitalia are really not very attractive words. In Tantra, the term that we use for the vagina is the yoni, and yoni means sacred space. And if you think about being with your sacred space, it brings about a much nicer thing than something I can't say.
Right. Something with a bad smell or after an animal, that kind of thing. Yes.
Yeah, and I always think that's an interesting concept, because the yoni, if we're going to begin to use that term, is and the uterus and all of that is where life happens. It's
sure.
like, and so in the older some of the older religious texts that are pre-Christian, you have, concepts like she who bleeds and does not die, which is really a powerful thing to be. And so the uterus and the vagina and all that become the place where that which is not becomes.
Right.
And that's a powerful thing, to have that which is not becoming.
That sounds very powerful. It sounds very empowering.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that. I'll have to use that more. So, do you think women have more discomfort with their bodies than males in the home?
I do.
Okay.
I definitely do.
Yeah, I do too.
We're really taught how we're supposed to look.
Sure.
And, right down to the details of where we're supposed to shave and which hair is supposed to be
missing. And then it's not okay to be hairy, to have these natural
your natural self just does not work.
Right.
And so, there's definitely a discomfort with how we look and how we dress. And, a woman, everything that she does, there's a meaning. There's something that it means to wear makeup, and there's something different that it means to not wear makeup. Where a man just doesn't wear makeup, and there's no analysis about that.
He's not saying anything. He's not making a statement.
Yeah, there's just much less of a statement. Jeans and a T-shirt for a guy, it's just normal for a woman. It means sloth if she wears something else. It means slut if she wears something else. It means prim and proper and prudish. And every single thing that she does, there's a meaning attached to that.
Well, and I think, that plays into the whole idea of whether or not you're going to be the object of someone else's desire or whether you're going to be the subject of your own desire, and just have pleasure, talking about having pleasure on purpose again, and making sure that you have an aesthetic that takes you in. I mean, I was talking earlier this week about women who are overweight, whether or not they feel like they can even be sexual, because if you're not a desirable object, should you be allowed to be sexual at all? And so if you're the object of someone's desire, then you don't think you have a right to be sexual. But if you're the subject of your own desire, then you think you definitely have a right to have pleasure, because you're interested in having your own pleasure and experiencing your own body.
That's really interesting. It seems like women often get the idea that we're working for somebody else, that nurturing, that you must be caring for someone else, and that's the same kind of thing.
Exactly.
We're objects for someone else's desire, whether they're male or female. It's for them and not. When it becomes about us, we often get uncomfortable with that attention. Complicated.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think, as a sisterhood, that we learn fairly early on in the school ground to we can be really hurtful towards each other, and the language that we use towards somebody who's getting a little too much attention can really be harmful. And so I think there's a place for women to go in terms of really owning our sexuality as a sisterhood and really embracing it and encouraging it in each other, and being able to look at a friend and say, wow, you look really hot tonight, rather than having her wondering, am I too low cut, and is she saying something behind my back, and really being able to encourage that.
I think that's about that object thing all over again, too. If you see yourself as an object, then you're in competition all the time of being the most desirable object, as opposed to we're both the subject of our own desire. And so both of us can be attractive, beautiful, strong, sexy, bad girls.
Sure.
We can be as sexy as we want to be. And my being sexy doesn't blot out you being sexy,
Just because you're good doesn't mean I'm bad.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I don't have to be the most beautiful one in order to be valuable.
And I think you don't have to be beautiful to society to be valuable as a sexual object as well. I mean, a lot of times we think that, as you were saying, with fat women, that we may not feel that we're worthy of attention because society says we're not really worth much.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing about it is we want to be careful that we're not letting Wall Street define our aesthetic. It's like there are many, many different kinds of beautiful people in the world. And it's really infuriating, actually, to think that this one tall, blonde Scandinavian who's only 3 to 5% of the population is the only one that gets to be attractive. Sorry. There are African American women with big thighs and big behinds, and short brown-skinned women with flat behinds, and all kinds of variations on that theme. And it's beautiful to look at all of the different ways in which human beings are attractive. It's really frustrating to think that we can't have an aesthetic that takes in everyone instead of just taking in a very narrow segment of the population. Sorry.
What I find interesting is when I see a woman who may not, according to conventional terms, be really beautiful, but who's really got that sexual energy running, she is gorgeous.
Yes.
She's being the subject of her own desire, and she is hot. And it's got nothing to do with size or anything like that. It's really the inner beauty does dictate a lot more than we tend to give it, than we tend to think.
Absolutely.
I really like that, because one of the things that I really find interesting is that one of the older definitions of erotic, if you go back to the word eros, it means the power of life. Yeah. That's where the erotic comes from. It's the power of life. And so, the erotic moves through the community in a variety of ways.
Sure.
And so wherever you find life manifesting itself, if it manifests itself in a sexual way, then you shine with that. And what you're shining with is the power of life. It's not like sex as an object or just a thing to do. It's sex as the power of life running through everyone and everything.
And sex is the power of life.
Absolutely.
Sex, energy is what gives life. It's no accident.
Yes.
It sounds very holy. I like this.
Yeah, it is. It is.
I want to come back to that idea of beauty for a minute, because in the gay male community, beauty is often the highest form of wealth. that it is what all desire, and that often is the only piece that men are looking for. That's often the complaint. Do you find that in your practice as well?
Yes, I do. I do find that. And I might have gay couples male couples that are coming in, and they're worried about aging. They're worried about whether or not they're continue to be attractive enough for their partner. And again, I think men are more visual than women anyway.
Sure.
So their desire gets ignited through looking at beauty. And who doesn't like to look at beauty? I mean, young, beautiful, who doesn't like young, beautiful?
I have a subscription to Playboy.
Exactly. Young, beautiful people are just great, to look at. Sure. But I think, for instance, with my own partner, one of the things that I think is interesting about her is that the older she gets, the more beautiful she gets to look for me. Because I realize, first of all, that time is finite, and I'm not going to have a lot of, infinity with her. I have a finite amount of time with her, and as she ages, her spirit, who she is, her soul begins to shine through. And I look at her sometimes in awe, and I say, oh my goodness, look at this being that I get to be with for the rest of my life.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Thanks.
She's a lucky woman.
Oh, she is, and I'm lucky too.
How about you, Ellie? Do you find that with the gay males that you've worked with, or in general?
Sorry, I was just so wrapped up in this description of your partner.
About the idea of beauty being the end-all, be-all when it comes to relationships.
It's a trap. It's really a trap, and it's interesting because, we tend to collapse sex and love.
Sure.
And, we think that if there's a sexual attraction, that love is going away. And yet, what if there can be a sexual attraction that, different people obviously define their relationships in a different way, but what if there can be a sexual attraction and it doesn't mean that the love is diminishing on the other side? The love can actually continue to grow. And, a lot of people that I know who've experimented with polyamory or who are polyamorous, which really means having multiple partners, they find that they bring this energy back to their partner, and it really actually enhances things to really play out fantasies and, and experiment and to actually acknowledge the sexual energy that's there. It actually helps them grow it, and they bring that back home to their loved one, to their beloved.
And that's an excellent point, because polyamorous relationships in general are more accepted in the gay male community rather than any other community in the United States. Why do you think that is? What are your thoughts?
Well, I actually think that it has more to do with the fact that women tend to be nesters and tend to be relationship oriented. In this, and that's just how women are, and they get socialized like that as well. It reinforces that. And I think when you are male, there's less of a social pressure to do that. You can be sexual in a lot of different ways. And also, I just think that men have more of a propensity towards being with more than one partner. That's just an opinion. I could be completely wrong about it. I don't know, but that's what I think.
And it can come from a lot of different places, biological, social. You said a lot of socialization in it.
Exactly. But I think definitely men are biologically set up to be in more than one relationship at a time.
It seems like the stereotype for relationships is that lesbian relationships, it's all about the relationship. It's all about talking. It's all about processing the relationship. And men, it's the other. It's all about sex without the relationship. Women get the relationship without the sex. Is that what you found, and how do you work with that? Ellie, you want to?
It's what I see. It's what I see in conversation. And the question is whether there's a problem with it. Some people are perfectly happy with that, and if that's working, then that's fantastic, and there's nothing to fix.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is mostly what I think people are comfortable with, but lots of times people come to therapy because they want something different. And I think it's more about balancing that. With gay men in relationship, it's about giving them permission to have feelings, giving them permission to be intimate with each other, not just sexually but emotionally.
Sure.
And with women, it's like, okay, you all stop processing so much and actually get down to the nitty-gritty of having some sex. And it's also working on what kinds of things make them resentful, and working through those resentments. So you want to have balance, I think, in both of them. You don't want to have this rigidly sexual relationship that doesn't have emotional connection. Sure. And you also don't want to have this deep emotional connection where there's no sex going on.
It has to have that balance. And same as you were saying with the masculine and the feminine, having that balance, and that's kind of seemed to be what you specialized in.
Yeah, well, and having each person have both their masculine and their feminine aspect coming out lets there be more of a spark in the relationship, which works both for the relationship and both for the emotional aspect of the relationship and also for the physical aspect of the relationship. It provides a lot of power. And, for a gay male couple, bringing out some of the yin energy, letting some of that softness come in, which is really what you're talking about there, and just in Eastern terms.
Yes.
Yeah, is really a way to let the relationship last longer. It helps them get through some of the more challenging, tougher times. And then, for the lesbian relationship, sex is a great thing. Pleasure is so healing. And, and we forget that. We've been so taught in our culture to put sex on the back burner, and we completely forget how important it is for our healing. And really having that as a way to bond and create connection between people.
And I think that's what it comes out. It's a basic human need, whether you're gay, lesbian, straight, whatever you are. It's a basic human need that often, because of some of the message that we're hearing, seem to get derailed. Because it's not acceptable to have that as a basic human need. We're in denial.
Yeah, it's like having, nobody tells you that you have eyeballs that work, and no one says, don't look. Don't look at anything. It's terrible to look.
Exactly.
But people tell you all the time, don't use that penis. Don't use that clitoris for any pleasure,
Right.
And the body is designed completely for pleasure and enjoyment. It's designed for that.
Absolutely.
And we are often taught that to see that as an enemy, to see the body's desire for pleasure as something that's bad, and that we are against our body. We have to make our body an enemy. And what I try to do is try to get people to think of their bodies as friends and as something that's really good for them to experience. And
you're working together.
Yes. Yeah, you're not separate from your body. You're living in your body.
Which I think, as a Western culture, that's often very hard for us to understand. That this idea that the mind and body are connected. Do you find it hard to bring those Eastern ideas to us?
I don't.
Oh, good.
Believe it or not, I really don't. People are just waiting for this. They know that there's something that hasn't been working. And, and just being able to bring them through an exercise, people seem very willing to try just about anything. And, and being able to bring them through an exercise, and particularly something where I have somebody focus on pleasure, and out of focusing on pleasure, they start to feel better emotionally. And which it makes sense, and yet we forget about it. And so being able to take somebody through a meditation that really focuses and expands on their body and creates just some deep connection, it shifts everything. There's a whole different set of chemicals that get released into the body when we're in pleasure than when we're beating on ourselves. And, and out of that, we find ourselves being more loving, more compassionate. I think we would have peace in the world. I hope I can say this, but if some of our world leaders were experiencing more pleasure and perhaps better quality pleasure, then we may not be having as many wars and as many skirmishes, because until we can really handle intimacy and love with somebody that matters to us, it's really hard to do it with somebody across the world that we don't even know.
But I think I'm really surprised at the amount of sadness that comes into my office, how sad and filled with grief people are at the loss of their sexual lives in their long-term relationships.
Well, I'd like to thank you both for joining us. But before we go, if you would like to say a little bit about what you're doing. I know you're both doing some really important things in these areas. So, Evelyn, why don't you begin by just telling our audience a little bit about what's happening?
Well, I have a private practice. It's called Glow Counseling, and you can reach me at www.glowcounseling.com. I also do a radio show from 8 to 8:30 on Sassy 107 every Wednesday morning from 8 to 8:30. And I would hope people would listen in.
Excellent. I think I will.
Okay, good. And so that's what I'll have some workshops coming up that will be advertised on the website.
Excellent. Excellent.
Sassy girl.
That's back to the Wiggler. We got Sassy and the Wiggler.
Yeah, so I have a private coaching practice, and I specialize in helping people to experience more pleasure and more love in their relationships and also with themselves, really experiencing more love for themselves. I also run a lot of workshops. I've got a few coming up that are really designed around releasing some of that resentment and that anger, but in a way that feels really good. And, you know, it's very much just about connecting inside and letting go and letting down that guard and that shield so we can actually just be exactly who we are and be connected with our partner. And those, I know this may not be aired for a little while, so the best place to go look is on my website, which is www.wildwiggle.com.
Excellent. Well, I think anybody would be happy to join either one of your workshops. So thank you very much. Well, thank you, Ellie and Evelyn, for joining us tonight. It's certainly given me a lot to think about tonight when I see my wife. So thank you for watching, and I hope you explore all your facets of sexuality as well.